I never thought I'd be in the middle of an entitled parent story. I mean, sure, I'd heard stories of parents who thought their kids were better than everyone else, but I never thought it would happen to me. It all started when I started high school. I was excited to start a new chapter of my life and make some new friends. Unfortunately, that didn't happen right away. I was quiet and shy, and I didn't know how to talk to people. But I was determined to make some friends, so I started getting involved in school activities. I joined the debate team, the drama club, and even the chess club. It was in the chess club that I met my best friend Josh. Josh was outgoing and friendly, and he took me under his wing. He introduced me to his group of friends, and soon I was part of a tight-knit group of nerds. We played board games, watched movies, and talked about our favorite books. But our little group wasn't without its problems. There was one kid, Ronald, who always seemed to be trying to one-up everyone. He was always bragging about his grades and talking about how smart he was. At first, we tried to ignore him, but he was always there, always trying to make us feel inferior. And then, one day, his mom, Karen, showed up. Karen was the epitome of an entitled parent. She was loud, pushy, and always demanding special treatment. She would show up at school events and demand that her son be given special treatment. She even tried to get the school to change his grades because she thought he deserved better. One day, Karen showed up at our chess club meeting. She marched right up to our table and demanded that we let her son play with us. "I heard you guys are really good at chess," she said. "My son is a prodigy, you know. He's been playing since he was 3. We didn't want to be rude, so we agreed to let Ronald play with us. But as soon as he started playing, we realized that he wasn't as good as he claimed to be. In fact, he was pretty terrible." But that didn't stop Karen from bragging about how good he was. She kept interrupting our game to tell us stories about how smart he was and how he was going to get into Harvard. We tried to ignore her, but it was getting harder and harder to concentrate. And then things took a turn for the worse. Ronald made a mistake in his game, and I took advantage of it. I made a move that put him in checkmate. He looked stunned for a moment, and then he turned to me and sneered. "You cheated," he said. "What?" I said, surprised. "How did I cheat?" "You distracted me," he said. "You were talking too loud. I demand a rematch." I didn't want to argue, so I agreed to a rematch. But as soon as we started playing, Karen started talking again. She was telling us all about how she was going to take Ronald to Europe for the summer and how he was going to win all kinds of chess tournaments. I tried to ignore her, but it was impossible. I was getting frustrated and my game was suffering. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Karen said something that made my blood boil. "You know, I heard that your mom is a teacher at the school. Maybe you could get her to give Ronald some extra credit. He really needs it, you know. He's been struggling in school." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wanted me to ask my mom to give her son extra credit just because he couldn't keep up with the rest of us. I felt insulted and angry. How dare she suggest that my mom would lower her standards just to help out her entitled son? "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why not? It's not like it's going to hurt anyone. Ronald needs all the help he can get." "I don't think it's fair to ask my mom to do something like that," I said firmly. "She's a teacher, and she has to follow the rules just like everyone else." She got angry and yelled, "Who do you think you are? You're just a kid. You don't know anything about how the world works. My son deserves to get good grades, and if that means getting a little extra help, then so be it." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. Who was she to tell me what was fair and what wasn't? I had worked hard to get good grades, and I wasn't about to let her entitled attitude undermine all the effort I had put in. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. My grades are my own, and I earned them through hard work and dedication. If your son wants good grades, he's going to have to work for them, just like the rest of us." Karen scowled at me. "You'll regret this. You and your little friends think you're so smart, but you don't know anything about the real world. You'll see." And with that, she stormed out of the room, dragging her sulking son behind her. We all breathed a sigh of relief and tried to get back to our game, but it was clear that Karen's entitled attitude had put a damper on our fun. A few days later, my mom called me into her study. She had a serious expression on her face, and I felt a twinge of apprehension. What if Karen had gone to her and complained about me? What if my mom was going to scold me for being rude to a parent? But when I sat down in front of her desk, my mom smiled at me. I heard about what happened with Karen and Ronald, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Really? I said, surprised. Yes, you stood up for yourself and your beliefs, even when it was hard. That's a sign of maturity and strength, and I want you to know that I support you 100%. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was rare for my mom to be so openly supportive, and I felt grateful and proud at the same time. But, my mom said with a slight twinkle in her eye, I also have to teach Karen a little lesson. What do you mean? I asked her. Well, Karen is a little too used to getting her way. She thinks that she can bully people into doing what she wants, and that's not okay. So I'm going to have a little chat with her and remind her that the world doesn't revolve around her entitled son. I grinned. Good luck with that, I said, still a little skeptical. But my mom was true to her word. A few days later, Karen stormed into the school. She barged into my mom's classroom and demanded to know why I hadn't given her son extra credit. My mom, who was in the middle of teaching a class, calmly asked Karen to wait until the end of the lesson. Karen fumed and paced at the back of the room, muttering to herself and shooting daggers at me every now and then. When the class was over, my mom called Karen into her office and shut the door. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell from the muffled voices that things were getting heated. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash, and I jumped up from my seat, heart racing. Had Karen attacked my mom? Had she broken something in the room? But when I burst into the office, I saw something that made me burst out laughing. Karen was sprawled on the ground, her face twisted in anger and humiliation. My mom stood over her, looking perfectly calm and collected. What happened? I asked, still chuckling. Karen lost it and tried to attack me, my mom said, a hint of amusement in her voice. But as you can see, she may have tripped on my leg. Karen glared at me and my mom, then scrambled to her feet and stormed out of the room. I was pretty much entertained at seeing her entitled attitude brought down a peg. I never thought that a simple trip to the grocery store would turn into one of the most memorable moments of my life. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had just finished my shift at the local pet store. As I walked towards my car, I noticed a woman standing next to a parked vehicle, a luxurious car that screamed expensive. She was tapping her foot impatiently, glaring at me as I approached. "Excuse me," she said as I walked past her. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I turned around, wondering what she wanted. "Sure," I replied. "My name is Karen, fake name," she said, extending her hand. "I couldn't help but notice that you have an extra parking slot. Would you mind moving your car so that I can park mine?" I looked around, confused. "Extra parking slot? What are you talking about?" She pointed to the space next to my car, which was indeed empty. "That one. You don't need it, do you?" I chuckled at her audacity. "I'm sorry, but I do need it. Besides, it's a public parking lot, and anyone can park here. I don't see why I should move my car for you." Her face flipped. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am? I demand that you move your car right now." I was taken aback by her entitled behavior. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get going." I turned to walk away, but Karen grabbed my arm, causing me to stop in my tracks. "Listen here, you little twerp. My car is much better than yours, and I deserve to park in the best spot. Move your car or else." I tried to pull my arm away, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Let go of me," I said. "I'm not going to move my car for you, so leave me alone." Karen's face twisted into a snarl as she tightened her grip. "You're going to regret this," she said, before attempting to push me to the ground. I stumbled but managed to keep my balance and pushed her back in return. "What is wrong with you? Get away from me." Karen let out a piercing scream and swung her purse at me, narrowly missing my head. I stepped back, trying to avoid her blows. She was clearly unhinged, and I didn't want to escalate the situation any further. I tried to reason with her, but she wasn't interested in listening. As we continued to argue, a small crowd began to gather around us. People were staring. some even taking out their phones to record the incident. I felt embarrassed and humiliated, but I refused to back down. Finally, a security guard arrived on the scene and intervened. He managed to calm Karen down and asked her to move her car elsewhere. She reluctantly agreed and stormed off, still muttering insults under her breath. I was relieved that the ordeal was over, but I couldn't shake off the adrenaline rush. I got into my car and sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm myself down. As I drove home, I couldn't help but think about how a simple request had turned into a violent confrontation. I used to be quite the messy person. I never cared about my looks. My hair was always unkempt and my clothes were never ironed. That was until I moved into my new apartment complex. It was a beautiful building with a lovely courtyard. The place was well maintained and the neighbors were friendly. I started to take better care of myself and I even started to enjoy the outdoors more. I'd sit in the courtyard and read, chat with neighbors, or just enjoy the scenery. One day, I was sitting on a bench, not in my best mood, but I was enjoying the sun when I saw a man approach me. He was dressed in expensive clothes and had a sense of entitlement about him. "Excuse me, do you live here?" he asked. I smiled, trying to be friendly. "Yes, I do." "Well, can you leave the courtyard? I'm expecting a guest and I don't want to be disturbed by anyone," he said, his voice full of arrogance. I was taken aback by his request. This courtyard was a shared space for everyone in the complex to enjoy. No one had the right to kick someone else out. "I'm sorry, I don't think I can do that. This courtyard is for everyone," the man huffed. "I'm a rich man, and I'm paying good money to live here. I expect to have some privacy when I need it." I couldn't believe his sense of entitlement. Just because he had money didn't mean he had the right to dictate how other people used the shared spaces. "I understand your request, but I'm afraid I can't comply. I'll be on my way when I'm ready." The man glared at me. "Fine, but if you're not gone by the time my guest arrives, I'll call security." I rolled my eyes as I walked away, muttering under my breath about entitled rich people. Later that day, I decided to sit in the courtyard again, but this time I brought my laptop with me. I wanted to work on my writing, but I also wanted to see if the man would confront me again. Sure enough, he did. He stormed up to me. "I thought I told you to leave the courtyard." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were talking to me." "Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about." I raised an eyebrow. "Look, I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not leaving. This courtyard is for everyone, and I'm not going to let you bully me." The man started to lose his temper. "How dare you speak to me like that? Don't you know who I am?" I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. He sounded like a cartoon villain. "No, I don't, should I?" The man glared at me. "I'm calling security. They'll take care of you." I rolled my eyes. "Go ahead. I'll be waiting right here." True to his word, the man called security. 2 guards showed up, and the man pointed at me. "That person doesn't live here. They're loitering in the courtyard." One of the guards looked at me and asked, "Aren't you Mr. Bob, fake name, that lives in apartment number X?" I smiled. "Yes, I've been living here for a few months now." The guard looked at the man. "That is true, sir." The man sputtered, "Well, I don't know. I haven't seen him before. But he's been sitting here all day and I don't want him disturbing my guests with his messy look." The other guard, who seemed to be more reasonable, spoke up, "Sir, this courtyard is a shared space for everyone in the complex. No one has the right to kick someone else out just because they're expecting guests. If you're concerned about privacy, you can always use your own apartment." The man huffed. "Fine, but I expect better security around here. I shouldn't have to deal with riffraff like this." With that, he stormed off, leaving me and the guards alone. I thanked them for their understanding, and they went on their way. As I sat back down on the bench, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. I had stood up to an entitled rich man and won. But as I looked around the courtyard, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man's guest had arrived, and it was none other than the CEO of the company I had been trying to get a job at for months. I had an interview scheduled with them the following day. I quickly packed up my things and tried to leave unnoticed, but as I passed by the man's table, he grabbed my arm. "Hey, You're the one who was causing trouble earlier, aren't you? I tried to pull away, but he held on tight. Let go of me. I tried to keep my cool, but my heart was racing. This man had the power to ruin my chances at the job I had been dreaming of. Please let go of me. I'm not causing any trouble, I said, trying to reason with him. But he wouldn't listen. He tightened his grip on my arm, and I could feel the bruises starting to form. Just then, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Is there a problem here? It was the CEO of the company I had an interview with. The entitled man's face turned pale, and he quickly let go of my arm. No problem at all. Just a little misunderstanding, he stuttered. The CEO looked at me, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? I nodded, trying to regain my composure. I'm fine, thank you. I'm sorry for causing any trouble, I said, hoping to defuse the situation. The CEO turned to the entitled man, a stern look on his face. The CEO turned back to me, a smile on his face. I'm glad to hear it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an interview to conduct. With that, he walked away, leaving me and the entitled man alone. The entitled man looked at me, a mixture of anger and embarrassment on his face. I hope you're happy. You just ruined my chances with the CEO. But I didn't care. I had stood up for myself, and I had shown the CEO that I wasn't afraid to speak my mind, and in the end, that was all that mattered. I smiled at the entitled man. Actually, I think I just proved to the CEO that I'm not afraid to stand up for what's right, and that's worth more than any job. With that, I walked away, leaving the entitled man behind, and as I left the courtyard, I knew that I had just won my biggest victory yet.